Good evening. Thank you all for coming this evening. We really appreciate you being here. My name is Linda Striyevsky. On behalf of the Charter Review Commission, I welcome you to our first public input meeting. It's great to see folks here tonight. I know you all have an interest in our charter and work with the commission. We appreciate your help as we continue on our work. The commission is really interested in hearing the opinions of Cleveland Heights residents regarding the charter. The other members of the commission are here tonight, all but one of them. So I will introduce them and ask them to stand when I say their name, so you know who's who. So starting in the far end of the table is Drew Herzik, and then Roland Eglin, Graham Ball, Stephanie Morris, Harriet Applegate, Greg Kluge, did I skip Stephanie? No. And Heath Thielen. And again, Jonathan Cecil is a member, but he couldn't be here tonight. We also want to express our appreciation for the support from the mayor and the city council. I want to mention to you that the meeting is being recorded, at least most of it is. We can't record the discussions at the breakout tables, but otherwise it will be recorded so that we'll have a record of it and it will be posted to our webpage. So if you have any friends who couldn't make it tonight, they can watch the recording. I'm going to start with just a couple minutes of background on the commission. As you know, a few years ago, we had a ballot issue that affected some charter changes that provided for an elected mayor instead of a city manager. This current commission was established earlier this year and was asked to make recommendations to the city regarding any further amendments that may be needed to the charter. So what we have done so far is review the current charter. You probably also know that a Charter Review Commission was established in 2017, and they issued a report in 2019 recommending changes to the charter. We were also asked to review their work and to interview officials and staff and who are those we thought was appropriate. In the appointment of this commission, I think the City Council recognized that the 2019 charter amendments that were presented to voters weren't really exhaustive or covered the whole scope of changes that might be needed because of the change in our form of government. And they really couldn't do too broad a set of changes without complicating what they were undertaking, because there's a rule that if you're presenting a ballot issue, it has to be about a single issue. So they felt that they had to constrain it to making the necessary changes to put in place an elected mayor, and they didn't go beyond that to any other changes such as those that might be needed relating to the legislative branch, given that there was an elected mayor. The instructions to our commission also recognized that the final report of the prior commission included a lot of very good work. Although that commission did recommend keeping the city manager, they also recommended a number of other changes to the charter that were very worthwhile. We've gone over those in detail, and they really do a lot of very important things, like modernize language and make some provisions easier to understand. So I personally am very grateful that they did a lot of heavy lifting, and we won't have to redo that work. So what we have done so far is we've been meeting since July. We finished reviewing the 2019 report. We're pretty far along reviewing the current charter. We prepared a survey that we asked our elected officials to complete, the mayor and the city council members, as well as former city council president Hart. And we appreciate that most of them have returned the survey and met with us. The surveys we have received are posted on our webpage. So if you Google Cleveland Heights Charter Review Commission, you'll find our webpage and you can see the survey responses there. The website also has agendas and minutes from all of our meetings and recordings of the meetings. So you can get some popcorn and enjoy watching the recordings. We also have met with Mayor Weiss from Shaker Heights and Mayor Wheelo in South Euclid. So that brings us to why we're here tonight for this phase of our work. We've gotten some input from our elected officials. We also would like input from the public. Any change in government brings some growing pains, and we want to know your thoughts on how we can help our government to function better. We in Cleveland Heights benefit from having a very engaged community. We know you have opinions and that they'll be valuable to us. So we want to hear your thoughts tonight. So here's our plan for tonight. Our first speaker is going to be Kevin Butler, who's the facilitator for the commission. Mr. Butler is an attorney with significant experience advising cities, including as to charters. He is currently the law director for Brooklyn and previously was law director for Lakewood. His job tonight is to give you an overview of the purpose of a city charter and of a charter review commission. After his comments, we will have breakout discussions on 3 issues relating to the charter. We've been discussing these issues at our commission meetings, and we're looking forward to your input. Guy Kilian, one of our commission members, will facilitate that part of the meeting, and he'll explain to you how the breakout sessions will work. We need to finish our meeting by 8:30. If we have time after the breakout sessions, we will allow individuals to come up to the microphone and have 2 minutes to offer comments. So we'll keep it to 2 minutes per person just so we can have as many people speak as possible. And then we'll have a short wrap up and describe our next steps. So one final point, we have gotten a few emails and a couple of comments when people registered expressing interest in certain topics which are very relevant, but they're not really the work of the commission. So things like, what are we going to do about severance, and can we find somebody to move into the day space on Cedar Hill? What are we going to do with the ARPA money? All good questions, but we're not really the right people to answer those. So we're going to refer the residents who ask those questions to our mayor and city council and help them find a path to get the answers to their questions. If you want to give comments to our commission about the meeting on tonight, we do have an email at crc.clevelandheights.gov. You also are welcome to come to our meetings. We meet at least twice a month. The meetings are posted on the website. Usually we meet the first and third Wednesdays, but we are having a meeting this month on the last Wednesday of the month. But you're welcome to come to our meetings. We allow time for public comment. So we do hope that you will stay in touch with us and keep your comments coming. So we will now have Mr. Butler speak. Thank you very much. Oh, okay, we have to call the meeting to order and call roll for the commission. So that would be Drew Herzig, Roland Eglin, Graham Ball, Stephanie Morris, Mary Applegate, Craig Lugan, Guy Kilian, and Linda Strejewski, and our absent member is Jonathan Cicela. And we also have Assistant Law Director Prem Ryan with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Nice to see all of you here tonight. It's really been my privilege to assist in my limited way as facilitator the commission to its work. If I were a resident of Cleveland Heights or a resident of Lakewood, I'd be exceptionally proud of this group. They're very hardworking. They lead a lot. They do your work on this commission, and they do it very well and very diligently. I am an attorney with McDonald Hopkins, which is a law firm downtown. I'm in their public law group, and I serve both on the inside of government and in front of governments on behalf of private clients, and also as special counsel to governments throughout my career. I was elected counseling in Lakewood for 5 years before I became law director there, and so had sort of a view from both inside the building and from both branches of government, the administrative branch of the government, the executive branch, and the councilmatic branch, which I hope gives me some good perspective on some of the issues that the Charter Commission faces as it looks at the form of government and how it can be potentially improved through charter changes. My job tonight is pretty limited. It's just to explain, for those of you who may not be as familiar with charters in Ohio, what they do, what they don't do. And so I'll get into that in a few very brief comments, hopefully brief comments. For those of you who've already heard a version of this before, perhaps some of you have served on prior charter commissions or in the government, I hope you forgive me. You may have heard some of this already and may know. But for those of you who don't know too much about how charters interact with government and how the government operates under charters, hopefully my comments will prove a little bit useful. So a municipal charter in Ohio is the single most fundamental document that governs the operation of a municipal government. There are 2 forms of municipal governments in Ohio. Cities, that is municipalities with 5,000 residents or more, or villages, municipalities with fewer than 5,000 residents. That's it. It's those 2 entities that are governments, municipal governments in Ohio. Each can have a charter. under Article 18, Section 7 of the Ohio Constitution. Prior to 1912, the Ohio Constitution did not provide for municipal charters. All cities operated under the terms of the Constitution of the state and under the statutes that flowed from the Constitution of the state. Those statutes still exist in one form or another. So there are a lot of municipal governments out there that still operate under the terms of the state statutes. And they follow those statutes closely in terms of who their government officials are, how they're elected, when they're elected, what their titles are. And you may see some of those municipalities around Northeast Ohio. For example, Parma has a statutory government, does not have a charter. Lorain, Ohio has a statutory form of government. Those governments frequently elect a lot more officials, executive officials, than charter municipalities do. But most communities in Ohio, certainly most cities in Ohio, the larger of the two municipalities, have adopted municipal home rule charters. The reason is because the state constitution gives them the authority when they do to operate a government in their citizens' best interest and formed by their citizens of their citizens. Citizens can shape the form of the government and vote to create a charter that carries that shape of government into effect. Legal Rights has done that. So that a home rule charter can operate in two areas. One, to give the local government police power, the power to enact laws that are local in nature, that are applicable to citizens and visitors and businesses and landowners. We think of a police power as a power of the government to regulate things that affect the public health, safety, and welfare. Things that are sort of external to the operation of government. How we drive on the streets, how we put our trash out, how we use our land in a particular neighborhood. But the municipal charters, more importantly, do one more thing. They provide for the form of government and the operation of the municipal government. That's called the power of local self-government. And charters really exist to carry that power into effect. Let's talk a little bit about what local self-government means. It's an inward look at the government. It's how officials are titled, how they're elected, what they're intended to do when they're in office, whether the form of the government is going to be controlled by a strong mayor system or a city manager system. I know you know about that. Whether there's going to be a chief administrative officer or not. Oftentimes that's provided for by charter. Whether the council president is to serve as a mayor or the council president is to serve as a council president only. All of those things can be controlled by a municipal charter under a form of local self-government. That's what a charter can do most fundamentally for any municipality that adopts one in Ohio. There are 192 chartered cities in Ohio. There are 61 non-chartered statutory cities in Ohio, like Lorain and Parma. For the smaller communities, they tend to rely on statutes more than they do charters. There are only 58 chartered villages in Ohio. There are 613 statutory villages in Ohio. So by far and away, the more popular form of government in Ohio for smaller communities is to follow the statutes of the state code. Whereas for larger communities like Legal Heights, a much more popular form of government is to have a local charter that's been adopted. Charters can be compared roughly to constitutions, but constitutions that are applicable only to those particular municipalities. They don't usually attempt to solve all the detailed administrative or legislative policy matters that a city faces. They are instead meant to breathe life into the government and give council and the mayor and other officials the authority to do things that will be prescribed and prescribed by ordinance, and that would fall in a different set of laws called the code. That's different. So think about the Ohio Constitution. It's that big. The Ohio Revised Code takes up an entire wall of this room. That's the difference between the most fundamental document governing the government and the set of regulations that's adopted pursuant to that most fundamental document. Same here. Cleveland Heights' book of codified ordinances is probably like that. And any municipal book of codified ordinances is probably like that, whereas the charter is like that. Okay? That explains sort of the hierarchy of documents. Charter commissions like Cleveland Heights' are all derived from the Constitution. So this group is formed because the Constitution says that there should be charter commissions to evaluate the charter in any home rule municipality like Cleveland Heights. Traditionally, charter commissioners are unpaid volunteers who just do this as a labor of love. I think that's a fair characterization of what this commission has been doing. It's a labor of love. And the commission work, the product of the commission's work, typically in any municipality, is subject to review by city council, and then of course, if city council approves of any potential charter changes, then the voters must then approve those changes as well at the ballot box. Changes can take the form of very unique, discrete questions, like, shall the form of the government be a strong mayor form of government, where the mayor is elected and council members form the second branch, the legislative branch? That's a discrete question. Charter questions can also be very broad, such as, shall the amended charter of the city be adopted? And that kind of question might incorporate all sorts of changes, stylistic and non-stylistic, substantive and non, into one small question. Charter changes may take the form of something along the lines of, shall the primary election in our city be held in September rather than in some other month? And how many signatures are required to get on the ballot if you're going to be a candidate for office in the city? Those are sort of fine, distinct questions that a charter can answer and a charter commission can weigh. But they can also look to larger, more maybe fundamental issues. And I know this commission is doing both. It's looking at the small stuff, it's looking at the big stuff. So the question really is then when to consider charter changes. And of course, anytime a charter commission is impaneled, the charter of the community determines usually when a charter commission is impaneled. It's periodic, it's every 5, 6, 10 years. The Charter Commission will get into its work and determine whether or not any changes are needed. And then the government itself can look at the charter and determine whether or not something is broken that might need fixing within the charter. Things change over time in any municipality. Cleveland Heights has just gone through what I think is a pretty monumental change to its form of government in just a few years. And this commission is left to then figure out how the charter interacts with that new form of government. The current charter interacts with that new form of government. So things do change over time, and voter sentiment changes over time. State laws might they may change, and when state laws change and a charter doesn't fill in the gap or speak to an issue or conflict with that state law, even as it relates to local self-government, the most fundamental power that a charter can give a city, a charter may then need to be updated in order to counter state law if state law is not harmonious with the ideals of the community. In Ohio, we've got a General Assembly that, generally speaking, does not get up in the morning and think about how to help cities. I think it's fair to say. I think it's been characterized, the General Assembly, as sort of has a township view of the world. And so cities are not, I think, well represented in the policy making that goes on in Columbus. I say that delicately, and they try to be sparing. Those legislators don't have cities in mind when they make regulations. So even regulations that may infuriate your average voter, shall my city have a plastic bag ban? It's a good question. And the government may respond and determine that it's important for the city to have a plastic bag ban. The General Assembly may wake up the next day and say, we do not like cities enacting plastic bag bans, and therefore we're going to pass legislation that forbids municipalities from doing that. Or we don't like when municipalities have primary elections in September. We want those primary elections to be in July, when everyone's on vacation. I don't know. Regardless, cities may determine we don't like what the General Assembly has done in a particular area, and we want our charter to counteract that activity from us. Charters can be used for that purpose. This commission has to weigh, though, whether or not the changes that they are considering ought to appear in the charter. And there are some factors that they weigh when they do that. Can the problem be solved by the passage of an ordinance in that code book rather than being placed in the most fundamental document governing the city? Can the problem be addressed with some administrative decision by the mayor? Because the mayor already had the authority to address the problem. Do we really need to put this in the charter? The mayor's already got the authority, even if the mayor's exercising the discretion not to, because the mayor had the authority to. Perhaps it's not a charter issue that the mayor does. Could some state law actually assist where the charter might be silent? Are the actual occupants of the office the problem? Is it just a personality conflict? But the next occupiers of that office or those offices will get along better or do things differently. If that's the case, then maybe the charter doesn't need to be changed to fix that problem. Those are all considerations. Typically, in the charter, then you find a very discrete, high-level set of principles that are promulgated for the community. Who the officials are, how and when we elect them, what the departmental structure is within the administration, what departments will there be, a department of law, a department of finance, a planning department, for example. Who will occupy those positions that run those departments? That's usually in the charter. The most fundamental boards and commissions in the city, a planning commission, for example, or a board of zoning appeals, a civil service commission, a charter commission. Those commissions are usually created by and found within the charter. Any high-level finance provisions, how the city is to spend its money and how the city is to ask citizens to give the government more money to spend. Those are typically found in the charter. But what's not? The details of council operations, the council rules, those are found in codified ordinances. The individual day-to-day obligations of directors and chiefs, the things that the processes by which they're governed usually are going to be found in the codified ordinances or elsewhere. Specific employment laws that govern how employees are operating, how they're going to be compensated. The regulation of businesses, the regulation of land, zoning codes, all found in the ordinances, very rarely found in a charter. Criminal and traffic laws that mirror oftentimes the laws found in the revised code, how to behave on the streets. Those are found in codified ordinances, very rarely ever in a charter. And then the creation of sort of less fundamental boards and commissions and committees of the city, perhaps ad hoc groups, or groups that are intended to be around as well. Those would be found in ordinances rather than in the charter. I hope that gives you just a general idea of what a charter is meant to do and what it's not meant to do in any city, including complete months. I'm glad to take any questions from you or expand on anything I've discussed tonight. Otherwise, I'll let that overview.
Commission members have questions?
Yes.
If you were to set something up so that department heads would be accessible to city council or to the general public, that they were required to be accessible to them, like you don't have to go through the mayor, would that go under the charter or under the ordinance?
I think ultimately, the commission has to decide that for itself first. And as you've heard, the commission's meetings are taped and available to watch. That's been a live discussion in the commission. I know I've been part of that discussion. It's really up to the commissioners to determine whether or not that's so fundamental to the operation of government that it ought to be in the charter. And this commission may decide to make a recommendation that there's be some provision in the charter, but it's up to the commission ultimately. And question.
Oh, we're going to talk about
Tell us, to what extent you think that statutory is able to fill in the gaps on functions that might not be addressed in the charter?
It often does. The question is, to what extent does oh yes, sorry. The question is, to what extent does the Ohio statutory municipal law, the portion of the revised code talking about filling the law, governing cities, fills in when perhaps a local government charter doesn't. And of course, we are guided. Generally, law directors and city officials are guided by the revised code. When our own government doesn't have a set of laws that address the same issue. But to the extent that there's a conflict between what's in the revised code and what's in the body of local law that we are permitted to adopt locally, to the extent there's a conflict, the charter gives us the authority to enforce the local law first. So that is often the case, for example, with respect to zoning codes. The revised code has a limited set of zoning laws that govern municipalities. Municipalities, under their home rule charter, give themselves the ability to regulate land and adopt zoning codes locally, which respond better to the community norms within that particular community. Those zoning provisions are going to step in and supersede whatever is in the revised code on zoning, so long as the community has enacted legislation that touches on the same area. Sometimes those conflict situations aren't resolved in favor of cities, I will tell you. And that's usually in a situation where the state General Assembly has determined that it's so important to enact a statewide form of regulation, of particular issue, regulation of guns, for example, that cities don't get the authority to step in locally and make local regulations on those.
Okay, so thank you very much.
We're going to move on to the next segment of our proceedings here this evening. So I'm going to turn over the floor to Guy Thelian, who's going to explain how we're going to do our breakouts tonight.
Thank you, Linda. And thank you all for joining us. Your role here in talking and giving us your opinion is very important in our work. We're going to ask you to give your opinion on three specific questions. I'll introduce the question after we reorganize the room. People are seated in the room in the back. We'll have about 17 minutes to discuss those questions. We'll ask for a report on the person who has been designated to be the reporter that will last about 2 minutes from each table. And then we will go on to the next question. We'll move on to the next question. In order to have effective discussion tonight, we ask you to adopt with us tonight just a few rules. One of them is, please keep the discussion focused on the purpose of our meeting. because there are many things that we're interested in, right? You're interested in. But let's keep it focused on the purpose of the meeting. We ask that each person be actively engaged and listen actively to what others are saying. And stay committed to the process of we're here to come, we want to hear what each of you have to say. For example, in writing, we're going to ask you to write your opinion, write your thoughts before you discuss. We also want to hear what, if there's a consensus, what comes from each table, or maybe there's two opinions that are coming from each table. Strive to share new and relevant information with the group as you discuss. So those are the ground rules we're asking everybody to adopt. Basically, stay focused on the purpose and participate. Play nice in the sandbox is one good thing. Okay? All right, so for each question, we're going to ask, to cover each question, we're going to ask that you designate, on each table, you designate a report. All right, that person's going to be taking notes, and eventually at the end, we'll take 2 minutes to share what the thoughts of that table are. Before any discussion of each of the questions, we ask you to write your thoughts on a card. Each question will have a designated color, the 3 different colors of cards on each table. Share your thoughts at the table, and if you come to a recommendation, or maybe multiple ideas of recommendation, the reporter will then share that with the group. Then we'll move on to the next question. A commission member will join each of the tables, but please understand the commission member's role is to listen and, if necessary, facilitate inclusive discussion. If someone's too quiet and not saying anything, they might suggest, do you have anything to say on this topic? Inclusion is an important value that we have. The commission members will also try to help you keep on schedule. And I ask you to understand that I will speak and I will say time's up. And I know that's really hard whenever we're in the middle of a discussion, but that's just something in order to stay on schedule. We need to do that. The final point here is, if you have other ideas, you're going to be in the agenda, you see the 3 questions that we have. If you have other concerns and other ideas that you may not be able to share at the end if we have or do not have time for open mic, please understand that you can write that question on any card that you're using, and it will be given attention by the commission members. Any questions about our process? All right, if that's the case, I'll ask you to self-select the table. Everyone can get up, self-select the table, and when people are seated, I'll start the discussion question off.
Hello, I'm David Goodman. I was at that table. Thank you. There was a strong sentiment at our table that board representation, at least some board representation on council, may enhance our current form of government. There was some ambivalent, I should say that was not a unanimous view, but a strong consensus. But even among those who favor going to some board representation, still some ambivalence about the balance between board and at large. There is a sense that boards would make sure that the particular needs of the various segments of Cleveland Heights, as they vary, would be represented by people knowledgeable about and devoted to that part of the city, but also some concern that if a particular board's representative on council is not a particularly diligent or effective leader, that board might be ineffectively represented. There's a sense that if we do go to boards, some aspect of budgeting should give each ward's representative some control over a portion, at least of the budget, for that part of the community. Concern about the whole issue of drawing ward lines and making sure if it's done on the basis of anything other than population, that you might have less effectively represented wards than others. And you could have wards that end up otherwise sort of isolated because of the dynamics of the relationship of a council member with the administration. Finally, a concern was raised that another factor in favor of wards is that the cost of running at large is high. And it might be less daunting or inhibiting for somebody to run for council from a particular ward than citywide.
Thank you very much. If we can go to the next speaker, please.
Good, thank you.
Hello, my name is Michael, I'm from Table 3. There were some mixed opinions, I think, at our table, although I think as the discussion went on, we tended to move more towards either an at-large system as we currently have or some sort of mixed system. Well, this bit may have been due to the order in which people spoke. Some of the benefits that people pointed out, though, for ward systems was the fact that you had someone who is your representative that you could go to. Often it can be difficult if you don't know many people on council. Who do I go to if there's an issue? However, although there were many concerns raised, I think, about at-large in general, there were concerns about the ward system in general, namely things to do with territorial issues. People being like, no, don't go to that council person, come to me. I'm in charge of this ward. Additionally, there was concerns about potential infighting amongst members trying to sort of cordon off their little piece of the pie, as it were. Additionally, potential concerns could be that there could be concentration of power. I brought this example up, but in cities such as Chicago or Cleveland, it is often mentioned at a time, it is often complained by some people that the leader for that ward, the representative from that ward, might have absolute veto power over certain decisions that are made in that area, which puts a lot of power in the hands of one person, which can have problems. Additionally, other issues potentially arising could be things like gerrymandering, other types of segregation, like particularly racial segregation, as well as the fact that it's possible that Cleveland Heights is small enough that at-large could make sense. That being said, it's possible that a mixed system could address some of these issues, as well as potentially providing benefits of, as mentioned, having that point person, if you're in a ward, knowing where you can go to and things.
Excuse me, we can move on to the next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Suzanne. I'm representing Table 4, and I'm just going to share perspectives that have not been shared yet. So in favor of the all-member at large would be that all council members are responsible for all the city and we're thinking about the whole city. There was support for a hybrid system in our group with the ideas of accessibility with reducing campaign costs and representation. And then there is concern about, will there be enough good candidates in a particular ward, people who want to even run? And then the question of how do you define the wards if you do a hybrid would be, will geographic wards actually represent diversity? Because there's different forms of diversity like renter versus owner.
Good evening, I'm Jill, and they're just telling me we are group 6. Thank you. So I'm going to try not to repeat what other people have said. Here are some of the pros that people mentioned for a ward system. It would facilitate stronger attention to specific neighborhood needs. People have mentioned that it would be less expensive to run, but that the hope was then that that might broaden representation, particularly for currently underrepresented groups, and that might also then encourage more voting and more civic engagement. The pros for current system at large is that, well, I should say the negative for the ward system is that it would incentivize competition rather than cooperation. The advantage of citywide or at large, most problems and opportunities that we're facing are citywide, and so the focus of solutions should similarly be citywide. There was a question about how in the ward system we would achieve consensus on citywide issues. And a question of what if no one in that neighborhood wants to run? And then we had a short discussion of none of the above, with someone suggesting a system, I think they said was in use in Columbus, where you have to live in the ward that you represent, but you're elected citywide. And then a slight tweaking of the current system, if all council members are elected at large, perhaps there could be some kind of less formal assignment of a kind of quasi-liaison role for each council member in each neighborhood, however those are defined.
So my name is Rachel, and I'm from Table 1, and we were a smaller group. We had some differences among us, but the argument in favor of a totally ward-based council, which was supported by one of our members, was that this could help in much better representation for underrepresented parts or populations in our city. The hybrid system, the biggest pro was, again, not having to campaign over such a big area. It might make it easier for the ward-based members could have an easier time covering a smaller area as candidates, and that it could help avoid the danger of factionalism that might arise from a totally ward-based system. There's also concern that the at-large people with the more resources to run would be more, and there would be more of an advantage for them in a at-large system. And so I want to repeat other things that were already said.
My name is Gary, and I think I'm number 2. Is that what we are? So we had a good discussion, staying as we are. I had a couple of supporters. People felt that we were pretty well represented and well served by the system as it is. But I think that most discussion went around the hybrid system. Nobody wanted to go to all wards, as far as I remember. But there was a lot of talk about the hybrid system, and rather than repeat what everybody else said about easier to run, developing new leaders, and that kind of thing. We also talked a lot about just how would we make the transition? What if no one ran in the ward? What if 4 people on council now were in the same ward? So the discussion, if there's going to be change, needs to focus some attention, a lot of attention, I guess, on that whole process. I think that's the only thing we said that was different than all the other reasons given.
Go ahead, Rachel.
Okay, so pros and cons. Pros, we believe that it might, I think we get consensus, promote greater collaboration of candidates and those once they're elected because of the nature of what they place on. Okay, will require greater collaboration among the candidates and also once they're elected by virtue of what needing to, be campaigning for a broader array of folks. It could improve the quality and power of the individual voter's vote, help prevent the election of single issue candidates because they won't appeal to a broad enough group, increase the quality, so this can go both ways. It's going to take a lot of explanation and education of voters. So candidates are gonna have to be harder doing that. So that can be a negative, because it's tough for people to learn the system of it. On the other hand, it might increase the quality of candidates and their connections with voters by virtue of the fact that they have to explain to people how this is gonna work. So that'll be a big responsibility there. And finally, just recognizing that any transition is tricky, we gotta be very thoughtful about how we prepare for it. And by the way, the state of Ohio might decide to outlaw it.
My name's, once again, Michael Bending. I'm from table number 3 over there. Yeah, the general consensus of their table is also pretty supportive of what I heard. A lot of people said things about it's a less adversarial system, it requires a majority. It can often be fairer and can end up with a consensus candidate, especially for races where there is a single person elected. I mentioned a little bit that for at-large systems, it can be a little complicated to try to do, but it can provide an interesting alternative using proportional representation for, it can provide some of the goals that a reward system has if you try to do a proportional system of some kind with ranked choice voting.
Okay, group 6, after discussion, took a straw vote. And what we had in group 8, 2 voted yes, we want ranked choice voting. 1 voted no, I want nothing to do with this. And 5 were very much on the fence with it depends. The pros, questions, more questions than attitudes. Would the complexity discourage voting? Would more voters feel that their votes would count? In a ward system, would there be enough candidates that has come up before? If there was one thought that this would be more important for a single position like mayor, and then there was discussion of in the current system, not ranked choice voting, it can be harder to remove an incumbent because multiple candidates split the vote opposing the incumbent. So ranked choice voting might make it more easy to move along someone you're more happy with.
We're table 4, I think, and we had, most people were more kind of in favor. I was like a strong yes, we had a kind of strong no, and then people kind of in between. A lot of the things we talked about, other people talked about. There were questions about whether or not it would be too complicated, questions about whether or not people might pretend to be more moderate just to like sort of appeal to voters and not really. And then also, again, some questions about, especially if we thought about this for council, if that would be too many candidates. They were talking about people being outside campaigning and you're already trying to like, educate people on who's running. And then if you have exponentially more people running, whether or not that can be an issue. But people, we were kind of open to thinking about it and the idea of they got more people involved and more moderate.
I now know that I'm from table 5. So I think we spent most of our time educating each other about how this might work and had similar thoughts to those others have reported. A sense that this might be empowering and encouraging to voters, not having to make an all or nothing single choice, that it gives you option and possibilities to think about more than just one candidate. Sense that this would work more effectively for any executive office or for any election where only one candidate is being selected. The sense that our current at-large elections in council already do give some version of this where there are more offices, more candidates than there are open offices. The converse of the fact that this might heighten citizen engagement is also the sense that it would demand more citizen engagement. A whole different level of thought would need to be given, more extensive thought given to other candidates other than the one to whom you might have initially been attracted, and a sense that it might diminish extremism and extreme partisanship if every candidate knew that he or she might have to appeal to more than a very strong base, but would also potentially need other voters to get them over the 50%. Okay, thanks.
Hi, I'm Walter from Table 2. We did not take any kind of poll on this, but there was definitely one member of our table who was definitely against this. And what was brought up, I think our table was generally supportive of it, but we did take a poll. But what the person who was against it brought up was New York City, which apparently made a real hash of it on their mayoral election, and talked about how at a local level, this could work as a learning experience for people for using this on a wider level, so people could get used to this system. And that's about it. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Barbara Hawley. I'm reporting for table number 4. We've been democratic and everybody, we have a different person respond to each question. So.
That's how we get recognized.
Right. Our table, I believe, was unanimous in the view that the charter should specifically provide a process for members of the heads of the various departments and the mayor appearing before council to respond to questions that council has, because council needs that information in order to perform their public duty. And I happen to point out, because I knew this from my past professional life, that the Ohio Revised Code very clearly says that the mayor and the members of the departments must appear before city council if requested to do so by city council, so that if we were a city governed by Ohio law, as the first speaker tonight discussed, this wouldn't even be an issue. And because it has been an issue in the city of Clifton Heights, our table felt that it was very important that the charter be amended to address this, so that council clearly has the right to compel the appearance of the mayor and the heads of the departments. And in furtherance of that, we also talked about transparency being important generally, and people talked at our table about the open meeting law and the fact that not only should decisions be made in open meetings, but that the information critical to making the decisions should be available to the community in a public meeting.
Hello, once again, Michael Benning from Table 3. We talked about a lot during the table, but I'll try to keep this brief. So it was expressed that it was hard for certain members of council to do their job under the current system. If it's difficult to hear back from certain administrators or people within the city government, this could provide a burden to certain members of council. This was something that was expressed, it was expressed by council members as well as, over time. On the flip side, and it potentially something like this would help empower members to get information from city officials. On the flip side of this, there was some concern that maybe this might not be an appropriate issue for the charter. This sounds like maybe an administrative issue. There was also the concern about whether or not this could be written a little bit more generally, potentially by empowering council to pass laws to the effect of having requirements on administrative heads, as opposed to putting the specific requirements in the charter itself. It's kind of like,
Table 5 had a lively discussion on this topic, and we were there was a strong and unanimous sense that the charter should address these issues, that the effectiveness of council as a co-equal branch of government requires direct access to the executive branch officials responsible for the various departments, and that without that access to information, responsiveness to the citizenry is severely diminished. The sense is it should be in the charter because it has to apply to every mayor regardless of his or her preferences and should not have to be renegotiated. We did have some discussion of what to do about the possibility of a council member who goes off the rails and bombards the executive branch with excessive or unreasonable requests. And the sense was if that is a risk, we ought to be able to rely on the leadership and other members of council to rein in a rogue council member who might abuse those powers. And overall, just the sense that this is essential to restore some element of balance between those two branches of our local government.
So my name is Michael Bennett, another organization Table 2 because we want to keep you guessing. So we agree 100% with the principle that there needs to be better flow and access to information from council to members of the executive branch. I'll call them directors just as a general rule, that that's an important part of governing, and council needs the information it needs to make decisions. And we don't really want to have limits on that communication, except for things like the charter where it says you can't have council members trying to supervise directors. The question we had at our table was, is this a charter issue or is this a charter issue? Are there other ways to address this? And I'm glad that Barbara mentioned the Ohio Revised Code, because one of the thoughts we had is, can this be done through legislation? Council has absolute power for legislation. They can override a mayor's veto if the mayor even disagrees. So we're thinking that that might be a different avenue to pursue to reach the same goal where like the Ohio Revised Code, and I can see that, but where council could come up with that process and codify it in the ordinances versus making a change to the charter, which is more of a broad governing document. And those are the biggest changes. There is some important stuff in the charter now that speaks to this about council not being put in a position trying to supervise or direct subordinates of the mayor, the administrator, the city administrator, and we're fine with that. But there's a troublesome clause about the inquiry thing that again we thought might be better addressed through legislation than through the charter.
Well, Group 6 was remarkably in sync in favor of the charter better defining the current right of inquiry. Some members were concerned, as has been expressed before, about a council member abusing the privilege, abusing the right, and so we're in favor of having some guardrails in place. There was also discussion of other levers that council has to encourage the administration to be more forthcoming, for example, the power of the purse. There was a discussion of the Shaker Heights Charter model where council defines the roles and responsibilities of directors, which of course can include requirements for communicating with council. But in general, there was broad agreement that the information flows need to be better, not just between the administration and council, but also between the administration and citizen committees, which have experienced some of the similar problems.
So Table 2 addressed many of the same, raised many of the same issues you wanted, and I'll try and be brief to elaborate on just a few of them. I think we get general agreement that there needs to be a better balance of power. We discussed at some length whether legislation could address it. Does this belong in the charter? The charter is supposed to set guardrails, so that might be an important reason why it does. We also discussed the fact that some of the tension and problems that have emerged over the last couple of years are due to the transition and how, that's been a very difficult process for our city to go through and for people in government to learn new roles. And however, the lack of clarity in the charter helped contribute to those tensions, right? So if we had thought there were some of these things beforehand, it might have been a lot smoother. But, and the question of access, how unlimited or limited it should be, have the ability to request versus requiring across the board every meeting that directors be present. So we kind of debated these things somewhat back and forth. But in general, felt that this might be appropriate to be addressed in the charter design in terms of, but be careful about unintended consequences. We've already had an example with us. Councilwoman Larson can explain to us why she had to run a couple of elections because we didn't quite get it right the first time, right? So it just needs to be thought through very carefully, and we're so glad that the Charter Commission is looking at it.
Well, thank you all. What I would ask you to do that is collect the cards, put them in the yellow envelope. And if anybody has anything that they haven't expressed, or if anybody has anything they haven't written down, please take your time to do it now and make sure it goes into the yellow envelope. And with that,
Well, folks, you've been so efficient, we got a little bit of time left, so if anybody has anything you'd like to say to the assembled group, you're welcome to come to the mic, and you can have 2 minutes to speak your piece. Anybody want to come up and talk? You're all talked out? Yes, Tom?
Hello, my name is Shawnee Weeks. And my name is Shawnee Weeks, and I just wanted to thank Miss Linda and the committee for this meeting tonight. I found out about it just walking through my community, and I saw a flyer in one of the business windows, so I just wanted to come out and find out what all the hoopla was about, so I plan on participating in a few more events. So it was nice to see everybody's face. And I just want to say, through all of these Ohio Revised Codes and all of the fun people in the room, that it's always nice to be able to represent the 5 protected classes that are in our community, in our area. So I just always want to keep that in mind throughout, these directors, throughout the mayor's office, throughout these directors, throughout all of these elected people that we're discussing. Even in the charter review, we have to remember that we're all different. We're not all the same, whether we can see everybody's differences in the same way or not the same way, that, we all have a voice and we all have to be here for the same reason, because those protected classes is who I represent on a lot of different levels. And if no one else mentions that this evening, I just wanted to say thank you for listening to everyone's opinions tonight. So thank you, and have a great night.
If anyone else wants to talk, come on up, then we'll make a little line here, so we can move from one person to the next.
First of all, I want to thank the preceding speaker. I didn't catch your name, but that was beautiful and great, and thank you for sharing it. And let's give them a round of applause. I mentioned before, my name is Michael Bennett. I just want to stand here and give thanks and a shout out both to the current Charter Review Commission chaired by Linda and the members who are here, but also to acknowledge and appreciate the work that was done by the previous Charter Commission. I think they deserve public recognition as often as we can for the work that they did in laying groundwork for the charter change. Full disclosure, I was very involved in the Issue 26 campaign, which effectively knocked that charter change off the ballot 4 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever it was, because the community felt that the change in government was at that time more important than the other changes in the charter. And I'm so glad that we've circled back now and that this commission has looked at some of those changes and from what I understand is seriously considering them and maybe improving on them because there was a lot of great work done. I know Jack was here earlier, did he leave? Okay, so Jack, who chaired it, and the other members that might be listening or watching this later on that commission, thank you for laying the groundwork. And thank you to the current commission for carrying that ball forward and getting us to the charter changes that by law we couldn't include when we did issue 26. We were limited just to the structure of government, and it's great that now we're coming back and looking at additional changes even beyond what that commission. So thank you.
Last chance. Okay, well, thank you all very much for being here. We really appreciate it. And again, the recording of this meeting will be posted to our page on the city webpage. We will be looking at the memos you gave us, and you can come to our meetings or send us comments at crc@liquidnights.gov. Thanks to the recognition members for being here. Thanks to the city folks. Thanks for Lee and Steve Barber. I need a motion to adjourn. Second. All in favor? Aye.